right. Well, welcome back again to Eschatology Matters. I'm your host today, Josh Howard, and I'm joined today for the first time on Eschatology Matters with A.D. Robles. So, A.D., thanks so much for joining me today, brother.
Absolutely. I'm glad to be here. I did the videos about you guys and I didn't know anything about you, but everyone in the comments, said that Josh is a good guy and that I should watch your stuff. And so people love you, man.
Well, it's good to be loved, but yeah, I'm sure the internet's a fickle place. So, love today, hated tomorrow, but we'll take the win, right?
Oh
Um,
yeah. Well, I've been around long enough to see that transition happen in real time, in the comments. So
yeah, no kidding, man. No, it was fun. It was fun to watch you walk through that. And for anybody that's watching that didn't know, so AD picked up on. I mean, AD, you've got your own channel. We'll make sure to put all that at the end and links in the show notes. But AD picked up on an interview we did with Owen Strahan and did a was it a 6 part or 8 part walkthrough?
it was 8 parts, man.
Eight,
That's
yeah.
how I roll.
Long form journalism, man. I liked it, but I was telling AD before we started recording. I've heard more feedback on AD's walkthrough of our interview, which I hope that's kind of an endorsement of the interview as well. But yeah, I think people have really enjoyed hearing you walk through it. So that was fun.
Awesome. Yeah, it was great.
So although your coverage was a little pedantic, if I can say that, AD, just a little pedantic. No, so
Yes, yes.
a lot of
I get in trouble because I'm a smart guy. I know that I am, but oftentimes I'll know of words through like not traditional means, like pedantic. The only reason I know what that word, well, I didn't even know what it meant, was from Seinfeld,
oh yeah.
and so I had to check to make sure I was using the word right. Turns out I was good, but don't learn your lessons from Seinfeld. That's it.
Yeah, no, the second you said pedantic, I was rolling because yeah, Seinfeld is my jam. So that's hilarious. But no, a couple of things I wanted to talk to you about today and just kind of walk through. This is the sort of conversations. Well, I mean, we were talking about application earlier. This is sort of to me the
Yeah,
application of eschatology, right? This is kind of where the eschatological convictions and the theology behind what we believe, where the rubber sort of hits the road, so to speak. So I don't think you'd probably describe yourself as like an eschatological, theologian or something like that, but like you're very much
no,
working in the realm thereof, I think. One of the things that we've noticed lately, and maybe we can just kind of segue into this a little bit and hear your thoughts, AD. But one of the things we've noticed is there are certain groups within Christianity that are trying to kind of grapple with the current culture. I feel like a lot of the cultural application just got amped up in recent years. Many people have observed this, right? There's been kind of an intensification of things, but there's also been a lot of bifurcation within our own circles. You and I kind of run in the same circles. We have a lot of the same friends that we interact with, but there's been a lot of, I guess, campishness regarding these things, and specifically when it comes to a little bit of I'm just going to use the word pietism, and we can walk through that and kind of walk into it a little bit. But what have you observed with that? You're online, you're walking through the application of these issues. Are we
yeah.
in an age of kind of fracturing, and specifically, what is this kind of pietistic line that is sometimes drawn in our circles?
Yeah, yeah. So, I think that's the narrative, right? Like that there's fracturing going on, and it's very easy to see why people would say that, because of a lot of online stuff, but also in churches as well. Like, even your local church. I mean, chances are, with the COVID situation, regardless of what you did with COVID and if you closed down your church or whatnot, regardless, there were some problems. Maybe people even left your church. Maybe they didn't, but there were some disgruntled people on either side. So it's not just online; it's in real life as well, and there's a lot of that going on. So, but I think I'm not quite as worried about that long term as maybe we should be short term, because I think that because of the darkness that we kind of see all around us and all of the pressure that the church is getting from a variety of different angles,
Hmm.
we're going to be forced into friendship. And I think I always think of that one Star Trek meme where the lady asks the two guys, "Are you friends?" And one of them says yes, and the other one says no. And
Yeah.
and it's like I can't I try. I mean, I am in a camp, that's for sure. But I think I try my best to be the one guy that says yes, we're friends. You know what I mean? We're friends with the pietists and all of that. Um, and I think a perfect thing that your video with Owen was so good because he was very consistently insisting that we should be advocating for good things, good laws, good governance, all of these things. And I have a feeling, I mean, I haven't talked to Owen in a long time, but I have a feeling that if we went down to the policy level, we'd agree on a whole lot.
Right.
You know what I mean? Um, and so, but I think the campishness is not deep seated. It's superficial in a lot of ways. Um, and so I have a lot of confidence in the future of this kind of thing being figured out. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but I definitely see what you're talking about. And I don't think it's not real. It's real, but it's not as deep seated, especially with our general camps, our general friends. I
Yeah.
would consider Owen a general friend. You know, I'm not Owen's enemy.
Right.
Um, and so I don't think that runs as deep as a lot of people are worried that it might.
No, that's good. No, that's a hopeful take on it. I feel like whenever you have the pressure, pushed in on a group, and I think clearly Christians in our culture and Western culture being pushed in on, there's a pressure that wasn't there in years past. Or maybe the pressure was always there and it's just a little more, vitriolic, a little more heated at the present. But anyway, it tends to make fissures seem worse than they are, like you were describing. So I
Sure.
appreciate that take on it because it's rough, especially with maybe it's just Twitter. AD, maybe it's just we should all get off social media because it makes it look as if we're at each other's throats sometimes, specifically with
Yeah.
the application.
Yeah. Oh, there's also too, and this is another thing that I think is very hot right now as far as discussions. There's also too, I think, a very latent effeminacy that we've kind of learned over time in the church. You know, I grew up in the church, and so I understand that culture and the kinds of things that were valued, the kinds of things that were poo-pooed and stuff like that. And you see Doug Wilson say something, or maybe kind of like maybe disagree with something one of your friends says. That's Doug Wilson guy, and it instantly gets kind of there's like a hair trigger to call it like an attack. He's attacking so and so. He's doing this. He's against him, and it's like you know we don't have the tough skins that we need. And I think like when somebody disagrees with what I say, I try my best not to respond. Oh, this guy must hate me. This guy must be attacking me. Things like that. And so that amps up what you see on Twitter because it's like, well, why are you attacking so and so? And it's like, well, I'm not really attacking him.
Right.
I'm disagreeing with what he's saying, and maybe forcefully, but we can have these discussions. And that's actually something I said in my videos about your thing, Josh, your conversation with Owen. My biological brother has no problem calling me to the carpet, for something, but there's never any sense of he's attacking me, he doesn't like me, he's not for me.
Hmm.
So I think that on Twitter, especially since you mentioned it, a lot of people have this hair trigger where it's like any kind of criticism, any kind of anything is like you're against me,
Right.
and it ramps it all up.
Yep. And then
But I think that's superficial too, is my point.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. Yeah, the thick skin thing, we talk all the time about like communication barriers and there's no tone in text. So, I shoot somebody a text, that's going to be different than if I call them. It's going to be different if I'm sitting in front of them, those sort of things. Like we get
That's what
communication.
emojis are for, man.
It's what-
Yeah, you put a happy emoji, everyone knows.
yeah. When I include the emojis, my daughter makes fun of me and calls me a boomer. So I try to
Yeah,
avoid
yeah,
that. But
yeah. That's right.
yeah, just addressing the issue though, like I just wish we could, yeah, because this isn't what I'd planned on talking about, but now I'm thinking a lot about what you're saying. Because when you have two brothers, you and I have a disagreement, there's an issue in the middle, and why can we not yell about this issue? And more often than not, that's where you see a lot of true brotherhood. Like the guys that I know the best and that I trust the most, we can really yell about something and not be offended about it. I don't know if
Yeah,
that's been
yeah.
your experience as well.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, before I was a Christian, I got in fistfights with my friends where like in 30 minutes we were like best friends again. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Seminary might be better with fistfights now that I'm thinking about it, but tell me a little bit about this though, AD. Let me push in on the pietism thing because pietism, and let me just define it. Obviously, there's a 16th, 17th century European continental movement of pietism. You can find strains of pietism in Lutheranism, Reformed theology, et cetera, et cetera. So like there's a theological strand to pietism, but typically when we talk about pietism, when you or I might reference something as pietistic, we're talking about an inward focus, right? That was a big form and function of the pietistic movement was, and some of it good, but it was about inward devotion, inward personal piety. You had a reaction against nominal Christianity, all that good and fine. But when we're talking about pietism, we're talking about sort of a kind of reflexive worldview in which you are inwardly focused to the exclusion of outward focus. So
Yeah, that's right.
so we could think of things with the outward focus like cultural engagement or national involvement or whatever you want to frame that as. But it seems that pietism, I don't know if it's on the rise or if it's just kind of a hot topic right now. But what's been
Yeah.
some of your take with pietism, specifically when it comes to application, specifically when it comes to cultural engagement, church state issues, that sort of thing? What have you
Yeah.
seen?
Yeah, yeah. Well, this is the big thing, right? Because, it's hard sometimes for Christians to walk and chew gum at the same time because on the one hand, being pious is a good thing. Being a pious believer is a good thing. Like you should seek every single day. If you're tempted towards pornography, you should seek every single day to kill that within you, right? To the point where it's not even a temptation for you anymore. Like you want to work towards that, right? You don't want to look at porn, you want to put safeguards, and you want to figure out what is this thing that drives me to do this thing that I don't believe in, right? So on the one hand, that kind of pious behavior in practice is a good thing. But that's the walking, but we can also chew gum, right? We can do the same, we can do both things. And so what ends up happening with pietists that we see is someone will stand up and say, "Hey, we should ban porn." And that's what they say. It's a very just basic, "Hey, maybe we should try to fight this porn thing at the state level too, maybe we should ban this kind of thing." And so the pietists will stand up and say, "Well, that's not going to do anything for the heart.
Right.
That's not going to fix the problem. The problem is within you." Well, so there's some truth there, of course, right? Like, of course, like it's not going to fix the heart issue, but it does fix an issue, and we
Mm,
can do both, and we can do both obeying Christ. Christ isn't just Lord of our hearts, and I think that's the problem, right? It's like He's the Lord of my heart, and we say that He's the King of Kings and the Lord of Lord, and the King, and it stands above the government and stuff like that, but we don't act like it. We
right.
don't act like they've got the government has duties to God that they should be engaging in, and so that's the problem with pietism as I see it. It's not so much the inward focus, because that's a good thing for every person, but you're right, it's the inward focus, and then not only to the exclusion of the outward stuff, but also it manifests as fighting against the outward stuff too. So it's like not only should you focus on the inward, killing porn in your heart, but also you shouldn't ban porn because somehow that would be I don't know, I don't even really know what they think, but like somehow that would be wrong.
Yeah.
And so that's a big problem right now, and I think that's a division that there's a real division there. I don't think at the end of the day that division is going to remain forever. I think there is some superficiality to that, but that's where our barrier is right now with so many issues.
Yeah. Yeah, you brought up the laws, which I think that's where it kind of hits home with most Christians. If you're
I agree.
if you're the, person in the pew or whatever, and you're watching these interactions, and let's just say you got three talking heads and they're all agreeing on everything, but then when it comes down to the application, again, they're at each other's throats. Well, just to give a good example about the laws. So, most of us would agree, just to pick an easy one, like murder laws are good. And so you might have some that would say we should not enforce Christian laws, we should not engage the political sphere. All those things are a distraction. They're gonna get us off base. But Christians should make good laws, and it's a good thing when good laws are made. And then you ask, well, why is that law good? Well, that law is good because it actually honors God's law, and it's in keeping with God's creational order, and it's passed by Christians. And if you have the opportunity to vote, you should vote for that law. But what is that if not a cultural expression of God's law?
Yeah.
And that's where I think the disconnect happens for Christians, because it's like you're both
Yeah.
saying the same thing, but you're arguing about how to get there.
Yeah, yeah. It's very strange, in my opinion. It's a very strange thing, and I think at least part of it. There's a couple things that I think about with this. Part of it is because it's very different than what we grew up in Sunday school hearing about. You know what I mean? I remember so I went to Sunday school. I grew up in the church. My parents did a great job with me, and then I was the prodigal son. I did whatever the heck I wanted to do, and I, ran away from the Lord. And then I remember I came when I became a Christian later in life. I very quickly, just on accident, found Rushdoony, right? And so, and I say on accident, but I'm a Calvinist, so it's obviously not an accident. But the reason, it's a funny story, actually. I used to read this very hardcore libertarian blog called Lou Rockwell. And on Lou Rockwell, my favorite author was Gary North, who wrote a column every week for Lou Rockwell. And I used to love Gary North. And when I became a Christian, I was like, oh, Gary North, he's a Christian. Let me take a look at him. And then I found out, like, not only was he a Christian, but he was like this super hardcore, like crazy one that everyone warns everybody about. So I found Rushdoony. And so I remember after reading Rushdoony, I remember being so angry because I was just like, I've never heard this before. Why didn't anyone tell me any of this before? I was so mad. And I feel like when people hear about application on the civil level or the government level or things like that, it's new and it sounds like nothing they've heard before. And so it's kind of instantly looked at arm's length, right? So that's one thing. The second thing is when you're talking about applying God's morality, God's law, um, there is some there are some legitimate debates to be had. Like that requires not only scripture, but it requires you to apply wisdom and prudence. And so there could be very hardcore believing Christians that would disagree on the best course of action forward, right?
Right.
Like I believe that prisons are immoral. Would I advocate for ending prisons tomorrow? No, I wouldn't. But I could see someone arguing with me from the scripture and with arguments that what I was compromising because of
Right.
that. And so at the application level, there's a lot more necessary room for debate, I think.
Yeah.
And so that makes people so uncomfortable because that's not how we want to do theology. We want to be so sure about theology. We want to be exact. And this is another kind of throwback to your conversation with Owen. It's like he wants it to be exact. He's want to be very precise. And that's a good thing in theology. But I think when we're talking about politics, I mean, we understand that politics is a game of give and take. And there's a morality, of course, that we're after, but there's going to be lots of wisdom that's necessary to apply at all times. Like if I was the emperor of the United States tomorrow, um, I'd have to be very careful about what and when and how I rolled out new things. There are certain
Mm.
things that would be overnight, like abortion would be banned overnight. But like things, there's lots of nuance, I think. Nuance is not a dirty word, even though I often claim that it is.
Mm.
So I think that that's what's kind of going on, I think, with a lot of those debates where there's two reasons for it. It's like you didn't grow up hearing this, so you're kind of instantly suspicious. And also, it certainly seems like there's a lot of disagreements and wiggle room that we have to kind of work through. And
Yeah.
that's not a bug. That's a feature. I mean, we should be there's it's not like if you had a Christian nation, there would be no politics and no political disagreements and debates. There would be, and there should be.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Looking toward the end, which by the way, I gotta mention, by the way, you mentioned bad words, and I would
Right.
include winsome as one of those bad words.
Yeah,
Um,
yes, that's right.
yeah. Even when
There's a
it's a
good way. There's a
good
good
sort
way
of.
to be winsome, but
Oh,
yeah,
okay. Yeah. Yeah. No, just looking toward the end though, I feel like that's been a good majority of our conversations have been just trying to figure out at least which Christians we're still talking about the same end goal. So there are some Christians, and I was going to get into this a little later. Hopefully, we'll have time to, but because of their eschatology, it seems they're looking toward a different end. They think we're headed toward a different spot. We'll talk about that later. But for those of us who at least say it's good when a people I'll use careful language. It's good when a people in whatever way honors Christ as Lord in whatever way. So like we've got this kind of end goal. We see that culture is downstream from religion. We see that laws enforce morality, all those things. And then we can fight about how to get there. But I feel like half the conversation is just establishing we are in fact going to the same spot. Now let's
yeah,
work on the details because we've used the illustration of a boat before. If you have a shipwreck and all the detritus from the shipwreck is washing up on the shore, we want to build the ship back, and we have a pretty good idea what that ship should look like. Now you want to go to hammering, and I want to go to sawing. Like, okay, well let's work out those details, but at least the ship is in view. And I
right.
feel like for a lot of us in these current conversations, it would be a lot better maybe to agree on the front end of where the ship is headed and then to talk
Yeah.
about the construction process.
Yeah, yeah. No, I think that's right. And but even with that though, so here's something I'll say, uh, um, even with that, you got two people that aren't necessarily agreeing on where this is all headed, right? You've got one person that thinks that we should expect society to become more Christian to become more moral. We get many blessings from the Lord over time. And then you've got one person that thinks, well, that's actually the opposite of what we should expect. We should expect, things to get really bad and things to get, horrendous. And then Jesus is going to come and save us from that. Those are very different destinations. But what I find so fascinating about that is that if you take the conversation away from that, from the end goals, a lot of times the people that think things are going to get terrible will still agree with you on what we should do today, what we should do policy wise today, only if you take it out of that conversation. But one of the things about Christian nationalism is that it kind of forces people to not account for that, not take that out of the conversation. So you get a lot more defensive over, oh, no, things are going to hell in a handbasket, so we shouldn't do anything. But it's amazing to me, like if you take it out of that context, though, at the end of the day, yeah, we should still be doing the things that honor Christ. And I think that anyone can agree with that. No matter what's going to happen tomorrow or 100 years from now, what you should do to honor Christ today it should look very similar, regardless of your eschatology. But the problem is that when you bring it into this debate, people they forget all about that, and they think, well, this is all a waste of time. This is all a distraction from the gospel. This is all a distraction from the religion. So I don't know. I mean, I don't really know what to do about that because, like John MacArthur, for example, like he's many times has said really good things about what the government should do. Many times he understands, he gets it, right? But then if you were to be interviewing him right now, and in the context of eschatology, I think that I would probably disagree with almost everything he says about what the government should do, because for some reason it's like in this debate you want they're like it just changes things,
Yeah.
I don't know.
I wonder, I'm glad you kind of framed it that way because I'm thinking toward like that role that eschatology plays in this whole conversation. We've heard, and I'm trying to remember who it was. There was two guys going back and forth. It's been a couple of months back, but they were kind of debating over, is it eschatology that drives? I think they're referring to social or cultural involvement or engagement. So the essential debate was like, is eschatology driving this? And it's probably not just like a blanket statement. I think with some guys you can see their eschatology. Well, you mentioned Doug Wilson earlier, so like he's very, I think, acutely aware of his postmillennial thought is driving a lot of what he does. Right, he's kind of aware of that in the back of his mind. You've got other guys like you read Abraham Kuyper. He's amillennial, and yet you read him and you assume like, oh, okay, sounds like a postmillennial, as we would think of today, right? Like a postmillennial cultural engagement guy.
Yeah.
So like with him, I don't think it was really the eschatology that was driving the boat necessarily with Kuyper, but I just wonder to what effect eschatology clouds the picture or to what effect it helps with the picture. Because, you mentioned MacArthur. So MacArthur, famously, and I don't want to just rag him for this, but, he famously said, we lose down here. The church should expect to lose, right? That should be our perspective eschatologically. It will get worse, and it must, in fact, get worse. But like you brought up, he doesn't exactly, when he puts, hand to the plow, I'm grateful for his efforts. He's building and he's evangelizing, and he's raising things. So, yeah, I'm just kind of, I guess I'm just talking out loud. I wonder what role eschatology does play in that whole thing.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've been aware of this phenomenon for a long time. In fact, I rarely, I mean, I'm sure someone could go find it, but I rarely even use the term postmillennial, even though I am postmillennial. I don't use the term, and I know for a fact that people in real time in the comment section, when they find out I am postmillennial, their opinion of me changes instantly. Even though I said all the same stuff, I've never been different online, right? So I'm not exactly sure what the role is, but I do know that we can be friends. You know what I mean? We can work together on some of this stuff, and we have in the past. I mean, again, bringing back John MacArthur, like, he eventually came around to the right position on the COVID shutdowns, and he did a lot of good in that. And he said all the right stuff, and he had exactly right out of context of a debate on this. You know what I mean?
Right.
Out of context, not talking about Christian nationalism, but insisting that the government is under God and should not be, doing things that God says they shouldn't be doing. That's exactly what I believe.
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure. I'm not really sure what effect it has. I mean, obviously, the way you view the kingdoms can affect this. I think like radical two kingdom people, like the new stuff coming out of the Escondido, that clearly has an impact on this. That's like in overdrive pietistic. Um, and I think that they're very self-aware of that. Like you said, Doug Wilson's always has his postmillennialism in his mind. I think those radical two kingdom guys always have that at the forefront. They're very much in opposition and they're aware of it. Um, but as far as the run-of-the-mill Christian who believes, left behind stuff, um, I'm not sure exactly what to do about that. But we do got to get on the same page though, because at the end of the day, like I said, things are pressing in on us,
Mm.
and there's got to be something that we can do differently. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Even if we expect to fail, we should have an idea of what we should be doing right now. Like that's a big part of being a Christian. Like, what do I do now? That's why I was so angry with when I first read Rushdoony, because for so many years I thought, okay, I'm a Christian. What do I do now? You know?
Yep.
I don't see like when I was coming up as a Christian, I didn't see a whole lot of teaching on that besides like don't steal, don't lie, and stuff like obvious stuff. That's the key. And so what should we do now? Well, it actually, in my opinion, you should be a post millennial, but whether you're post millennial or not, what you should be doing now should again look very similarly to what to me,
Yep. Yeah. No, I'm gonna steal a little bit or riff a little bit off of I saw Joe Rigney engaged somebody the other day, and he was pointing out the creational oughts versus the eschatological shoulds or wills. I can't remember how he phrased it, but the big thing was the creational ought, and essentially what he was combating was if you have a worldview or an eschatology that says everything's going to crash and burn, it's going to get progressively worse. In fact, it must get progressively worse. Like let's just say you're on the far side of that, and you're saying it must get worse, or else Christ won't return. Like so, you're almost kind of looking forward to and anticipating, not in a sinful way, but still you're wanting it to kind of burn down so that Christ will return. If that's your perspective and you're convinced that's biblical, the ought doesn't change, right? So the ought is still
Shouldn't, yeah.
all of creation ought to submit to the Creator. All of creation ought to worship and glorify the Creator. So
Yeah.
you mentioned a second ago that you kind of used kind of a wartime or a battlefield kind of an illustration. And if you're that soldier out there on the battlefield, it's not like you're like, sheathing your sword and just kind of laying down and waiting for somebody to kill you. You're actually fighting. Like you may know, like I'm the last guy standing on my side. Everybody's arrayed against me, but you're still fighting because you want to see the battle won. The battle should be won. You're fighting toward
Yeah.
victory, even if you're falling there on the battlefield. That's probably not the best
Yeah.
illustration, but it doesn't change the creational ought is what I'm getting at. And I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
that's what comes through with guys like Kuiper is like, I don't think Kuiper was as concerned with the eschatology of where things were going. He was far more concerned with what should things be doing? Where should
Yeah.
this direction be going?
That's so key. And I think that every Christian would easily see that with like an extreme example. So I'll give you one example, right? We've got we've got you transport yourself back in time, and you're in the crowd before Jesus's crucifixion, right? You know that this has to happen because you're from the future. You know that this has to happen for God's plan of redemption to succeed, right? That doesn't mean that you would be you say, okay, well, since it has to happen, I'm going to help it happen, and I'm going to, spit on him, and I'm going to, make, say crucify him and stuff like that.
Yeah.
That's not what you should do at that moment. You would easily see that that would not be what you should do, right? You should be one
Right.
of the ones sitting on the sidelines, crying and, doing nothing, I guess, if you don't want to. But it would be fine, honestly, if you were like, well, but let's fight these guys. But, obviously Jesus would rebuke you like he rebuked Peter. So here's the thing. Here's the thing. So that's an extreme example, right? You know what should be done, even though whatever.
All right.
But this can be subtle too. This can be very subtle, and this one is less subtle because it's personal to me. But I'll tell this story. It's someone that I know personally, and she's a great woman. She this woman loves children, loves them like like no one I've ever seen. Whenever I bring my children around her, it's like she's in heaven, right? Purposely did not have children because she thought that the rapture was coming and did not want them to go through that.
Wow.
That is it's more subtle than what I just said about, being one of the crowd and Jesus's crucifixion, but that is not what we should do, right? That's really damaging, and it's damaged her, and it's not what God wants for his people and all that kind of stuff. It's really, really subtle at times. because what you end up having is lots of inaction or very half-hearted action when there's serious situations all around us.
Hmm.
You know what I mean? And I think that's a real problem. And some people don't really think through exactly why they're not doing things or doing things or whatever. But I think we see that all the time in politics. There are local politics that you could affect change if you wanted to, that you don't. And maybe you're not self-aware of why you're doing it. The person in my family is self-aware of why they were doing it, but
Mm.
maybe you're not, but it's still affecting you in some way. That's a problem. That the
Mm.
more subtle varieties of this are a problem.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and in the United States, this is another big thing because what I'm saying, may be different in application if you live in Saudi Arabia than if you live in the United States, right? I don't know about anything about the politics of Saudi Arabia, but I'd imagine it's less freedom there. There's less input from the
At least
the
presently, right? Yeah.
right, right. So so yeah, I mean, you don't see like, Peter and Paul, advocating for better laws because it is a totally different system. Here in the United States, we do have the ability and the power to do good things with the civil governing authority, and so we should try. We
Yeah.
should try to do those things because that's what we should do, even if you expect to be undermined or expect to lose or expect it not to work. We should still try.
Right. Yeah. No, that's good. So you mentioned kind of the politics of it, and one of the things, well, I was mentioning to you there's a conference going on, at the time of us recording this, and so I was kind of watching a little bit of the conference, and saw some remarks made, and I'd like to hear his whole spiel before I comment on what was being said. But one of the things that was brought up was that we are to render to Caesar what is Caesar's, and so my question to you, AD, and then I'm going to walk you into it is, does the culture belong to Caesar? Um, yeah. So kind of, I'll just put my cards on the table here. I think that culture seems to be downstream from faith, right? So I think that our faith or our religious convictions, who we believe God is and what we believe is good and right in this world, what we believe is wrong, which everybody has a religion, whether they're, professing religious or not. Our conceptions of who God is, so our religion is upstream from culture. Culture then is downstream from our convictions. So when we have a culture, and I think it's inherent in people that we are just kind of made as culture building creatures, right? Joe Boots talked a lot about this. I think you've had him on your channel a few times. If, I think you have, haven't you? Was that your channel, AD? That's not yours.
Not
Okay.
me. No, no.
Okay. So anyway, but Joe Boot, and so
Yeah,
he's talked a lot about this, right? We're just kind of culture building creatures. That's downstream because when we make the culture, we say, okay, these are good things. We're going to venerate them. We're going to reward good behavior. These are bad things. We're going to make penalties against them or sanctions against them, those sort of things. But what I've seen the pushback from a lot of Christians, and this ties into what we were talking about earlier with the Pietism, right? Is that the culture is really that's just kind of the domain of Caesar, that not just the
yeah,
state apparatus, but the culture itself. Which is a strange take from what I've just described. I'm obviously not on that page, but what do you
yeah,
think to that objection for the Christian that looks around and says, "Who cares about the culture? That's Caesar's domain. We're just concerned with the matters
yeah.
of the heart, essentially."
Yeah, so obviously I haven't seen what you're referring to, so I don't know exactly the whole argument.
Right.
But what's interesting about it is, Jesus is talking about Caesar and God, right? Rendering things to Caesar, rendering things to God. Um, I think that if you're going to make an argument that like the culture, the government, that everything that they do there, that's just Caesar's, and the church has really no business with that.
Mm-hmm.
Like that would be comparing the church and Caesar, right? That wouldn't be comparing God to Caesar. So the way I believe this, and I think Owen would agree with this, Owen Strawn would agree with this, yeah, and other people that I would argue are more pietistic. um, God's over all of it, right? So
Right.
God is over Caesar. He's the King of Kings. He's the Lord of Lords. Not just a coffee mug verse. It actually is something that means something that is real. And so Caesar answers to God
Yeah.
for what Caesar does. The church also answers to God. The church does what God says it should do and doesn't do the things it says it shouldn't do. And then we all answer to God too. Our families. I'm a family man, so I answer to God for my family. As individuals, we answer to God. So God is over all of it.
Mm-hmm.
So it cannot be that even if you say that the government is in charge of the culture, right? Even if you do say that, which I think I can understand why someone might say that, it's still God's. It's still
Mm,
God's, and it should be ordered in a way that honors God. And you should do the things that God says it should do, and it should not do the things that God says it shouldn't do. And there's different maybe areas that it has authority over, or it plays in than the church or the family, but it's still God's, and God owns it, and God gets to decide what happens there, and
right.
if he likes it or not, and if he wants to destroy it or not, or whatever the case may be. So I don't know how unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's would apply as a way to sort of exclude God from the picture. I'm not really sure, but yeah, I don't really get that. I
Well,
wouldn't agree with that.
it almost seems, AD, like it almost seems, because one of the things I really appreciated with your walkthrough, well, with most of your videos, is you take pretty big concepts and you're just walking through them with pretty much plain spoken English, right? Like in an accessible way. It seems to me that a lot of people's reaction to what you just walked through, which I think most Christians could say yes and amen, but the knee-jerk reaction seems to be that any suggestion that the culture or the state is beholden to God, the immediate reaction is, ecclesiocracy. You just want, the
Right.
church as the actual mechanism over these things. And nothing about what you just said. You were very clear, like, no, God's the God over all
Yeah.
spheres. The church has its sphere, but the state is under God, as is every
Right.
sphere of authority. I don't know why there's such a disconnect with that. With guys that I would think would be thinking in those kind of broadly Kuyperian terms, but they hear you say, no, 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 the culture actually, there is a sense in which they are directly under God. They say, ecclesiocracy. You know what I mean? Like, I
Yeah,
think that's what
I
is
do know what you
heard.
mean. Yeah, yeah, that's true. And that's why you get, sometimes you'll get people that'll say things like, well, yeah, it's good and well that you want to have a Christian nation, but what do you think the Hindus are going to think about that? Like,
Right.
what are the Jews going to think about that? And my answer is always the same. It's very matter of fact. Well, I don't really care what the Hindus or the Jews or the Muslims think about it, because they're not in charge. Like God's still God, whether a Hindu believes in him or not.
Right.
He's still in charge. He's still over Caesar. He's still the king of kings, regardless of what a Hindu thinks. You know what I mean? So, um, I there's no expectation. Like I don't see why any Christian should have this expectation that they should have to be forced to pretend like things that they believe aren't true. Because
Mm,
that's what we have now. We have this secular kind of system where you can be a Christian all you want, just as long as you don't really act like he's not really the King of Kings, right?
right.
Like that's an ecclesiocracy. What are you talking about? Um, I don't see that kind of mentality in the secularists themselves. Like they act as if their fantasy is real,
Mm,
and it's not. And so there's no like I'm not like, yeah, you can hear ecclesiocracy if you like, if it, but the thing is, the facts are that God is the King of Kings, and we really should act as if when we say that we mean it, and that puts responsibilities on the kings that do exist, because the kings that exist are real. They're real authorities. It says so in the Bible, and it's not like God just said, "Well, I'll let you be the king. I'll be your king, but I don't really have anything for you to do."
mm,
Like it's not like that. There's no it's not a disconnect like that. He's involved, and he has a lot to say. And as citizens who have the opportunity to, we should hold them accountable to that, because they are actually accountable to it. It's not a fantasy. It's not, we're not doing anything we're not supposed to be doing. It's like they actually are accountable to Christ.
right. Yeah. So,
So
okay. So,
yeah, so sorry, and as far as ecclesiocracy, like yeah, that's the scare tactic. But um, I personally believe that just saying things like this in a very kind of straightforward way. In fact, I did a video today answering some random guy on the internet who put this bombastic video out about Stephen Wolfe. The video is called Stephen Wolfe, like "Will you kill me?" or something like that. It's very
oh
weird.
my.
Anyway, but I just, matter of fact, it's like no, this is the way it is. And I think that honestly, that's my strategy, because I think that the more times people hear regular people that aren't psychotic, and you could debate whether or not I'm psychotic, but just flat out say it. That's powerful. It encourages people to really act like they believe things. I'll never forget this. I don't know if you've seen it. Sorry to go long-winded here, but this was such a seminal moment in my life. I'll never forget. I was on YouTube just kind of, messing around, and I came across a Rushdoony interview on like 60 Minutes or something, or like one of those shows, right? And they interviewed him. And of course, the whole point of the interview was to say, well, look at this lunatic, right? And he was just so like matter of fact. And they were like, so you're saying you Robles? And Rushdie just is sitting in his chair, completely undeterred, kind of like Doug Wilson would be. And he's just like, I'm not saying that, but that's what the Bible says. What choice do we have? Just like that. That was so powerful, man. It's because he didn't freak out. He didn't get all crazy. He's like, look, it's not up to me. If it was me, I wouldn't say that, but what choice do I have? That's what God says. You know what I mean? Like, that's powerful. And again, even if you disagree with it, it's when you get just getting that reinforced. No, God really is the King of Kings. He really is. I think helps people
Yeah.
because it touches on the truth. Number one, so that it resonates because it is the truth. And number two, I feel like again, maybe I'm just being naive. People call me naive all the time, but I think that lots of people that are very against, theonomy and Christian nationalism, like deep down, they understand that it makes sense. And that's why you get the reactions you get. Because when you're not so sure of your position, you tend to overreact. I did the same thing when I wasn't sure I was a Calvinist. The more hardcore Calvinist I became, like I don't even find that stuff entertaining anymore to watch the debates. Like I don't even feel the need to explain myself. It's like someone asking me to explain whether or not the sky is blue. It's just like, do I argue with this guy? Like, I'm not going to argue with you. Like, it's blue, you know?
Right.
Uh, so I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if that's the right strategy, but that's my strategy. You know what I mean? I don't think it's a
Yep.
matter of like convincing them from arguments and stuff like that. I think it's just hearing someone flat out say, yeah, Christ is king. And so, we can't do this thing where we just discard all of these embryos because those are made in the image of God. And that's horrific.
Mm.
So that's that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
Yep. So tell me a little bit about this, AD. The label Christian nationalist.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm just curious, and again, I'll kind of like set up what I mean, but I'm just curious your take on the current maybe use of the term, how it's being
Sure.
received. There's been some, I hope, clarification. There's been some books that have come out. There was a statement on Christian nationalism, that sort of thing. Now behind all that, cards on the table. Again, I don't describe myself as a Christian nationalist, but I view that as kind of an in-house debate among brothers. I've
Yeah,
got
yeah.
reasons, and I'll walk through that with them. But it seems at present there's kind of two uh, diverging opinions. So you had the MSNBC newscast or whatever that came out, that little segment where I can't remember her name. Um,
Yeah, I saw it, but I didn't watch it. But yeah, I
right.
saw people talking about it.
Yeah, you didn't miss anything, obviously, but it's just again one of those clips that makes you recognize very quickly that to the world, all of us are considered Christian nationalists if you believe in any sort of
Yeah, that's right.
biblical tetheredness, right? And so then from that realization, because when I saw the clip, I was not at all surprised, to hear somebody saying, oh, there's Christians, there's Christian nationalists, and Christian nationalists believe these things, and you're sitting there listening to it like, well, that's not at all right.
Yeah,
But the reaction seems to be one of two things. Either A, there is the don't take the bait reaction, right? So some people will see
sure.
that and say, aha, so we need to avoid that term and avoid that concept because to ascribe it to, kind of to make it your own is to take the bait. So there's that response, which we've both got friends on that side of things. Then we've both got friends on the other side of things, which just says, no, grab the label, make it your own, baptize the term essentially, and go ahead and wear it because the world's going to consider you one, whether you want to be or not.
Yeah,
What are your thoughts on that? Like how is
yeah,
the discourse going right now?
yeah, yeah. Definitely. So you're right. So those are the two sides. There might be others, but yeah, those are two major sides. Um, yeah, yeah. I think I picked up on the fact that we were all Christian nationalists already a long time ago, right? Maybe like right during COVID is when I put that on my Twitter profile and started
Mhm.
talking about it. So that was something I picked up on early. That was obvious, that was, of course that's a play. Of course they're trying to demonize us. Of course they are, right? That's all of that is true. So if you're wondering whether that's true or not, it's true. Um, but the thing about it is, and I never called myself a deplorable, but people like to compare it to the deplorables. The thing about that is like deplorable was redeemed, but it's like not a good thing to be deplorable.
Mm,
It's not a good thing, right? So I never owned that. I'm not deplorable. I'm just a regular person, with my head on straight. That's it. And if you think that's deplorable, I don't care that you think that's deplorable, but I'm not going to call myself deplorable. That's
right.
that's an obvious play that I wouldn't accept. But as far as Christian nationalism, I got to thinking, I was like, these two terms are actually both good things, in my opinion. They're both good. So this is like somebody calling me a Christian back in the early days when it was a slur. At least that's what I
Mm,
heard. I don't know if that's true. And it's like, yeah, yeah, I'm one of those that follows Christ. That's a good descriptor. Okay, I can own that. And so that's kind of why I did. So I obvious is an obvious play, but in my opinion, though, the play is to get you to shut up. That's the point. So
mm,
all of these, in my opinion, and this is just my opinion, all of these people that are like not people that are avoiding the term and don't take it. Like for someone like you, even John Harris, doesn't take the term because a variety of reasons. I don't care about the term personally. I don't need anyone to call themselves a Christian nationalist. But as long as they're not taking the bait, because in my opinion, the bait is to get you to stop whatever you're doing. Because the minute you say abortion's wrong, you're a Christian nationalist, they want to demonize that so that you don't do that anymore.
mm.
That's the play. And so I did a video once. I think it was on that Twitter account called Local Distance.
Okay.
I
Yep.
don't know. I don't really even know who that is. I think it's a Christian. I'm not really sure. Um, I just know that I really hate his little icon. I don't. It just bothers me for some reason. Anyway, and he did this whole thing about not taking the bait and not taking the bait. And I, in my opinion, he's got it exactly backwards. The bait that is being offered to you is, look, we won't bother you. Just stay out of politics. And if you're going to be in politics, you're going to do it our way, where we nibble around the edges of pro-life, legislation, and we apologize even for doing that.
Mm,
You know what I mean? So you can play with us just the way that we accept it by our rules and all of it's a rigged game though. So no, I don't want to play by those rules. So that's the bait. That's the real bait is to get you to be so scared of being demonized. It's the same thing with racism. Everything is racist and they want to get you to stop opposing them lest you be a racist.
mm.
And so here's the thing. So it's number one, it's a good, both of those things are good. Nationalism is good and Christian is good, and obviously. And you might disagree with me on nationalism is good, but that's okay. In my opinion, they're both good. So I'm glad to accept it. I'm not going to stop. So I'm not going to take the bait that they want me to take. They want me to be fearful of being labeled this. I'm not going to do that. And the added benefit, Joshua, is that when you own the term, it makes all the right people angry and it gets them all freaked out and they start to promote you as a danger, and really what they end up doing is just promoting lots of good stuff. And so you get Dusty Devers, who's a Christian nationalist, and they'll say, look at this, he wants to ban pornography, and they put a clip of him, and all you've got there is a clip of him basically saying he wants to ban pornography and also talking about Christ and how he's the king and spreading the gospel. And so the benefit is that it triggers everybody into promoting good into the ether,
Mm. Yeah.
in my opinion. Now, some of the downsides, of course, are that, of course, there are going to be people that own the label that have bad ideas. There's people that have the label of Christians. I'm sorry to surprise you, that have a lot of bad ideas.
Right.
That's unavoidable. You can't avoid that kind of stuff. You
Yeah.
can't control what your enemies do. You can only control what you do. And so I like the term quite a bit, and I think it has a lot of benefits to it. But then again, like I said, I don't care if anyone says that they're a Christian nationalist or not, just so long as you're not taking the bait and being driven into inaction. There are so many big voices that are against Christian nationalism that it's just like, if you look at their tweets, you'll get a whole list of, okay, so what do we do? And there's never an answer. It's always nothing. It's always something stupid like, well, we just got to remember the Constitution. Like, what are you talking about? That's like the answer that I used to hate in Sunday school, where
Yeah.
it's like, oh, the answer is Jesus. Okay, that's great. What do you mean though? What is that supposed to mean? Because it doesn't help a young man when you say, well, the answer to porn is Jesus. All right, that's wonderful. What do I do about it though? Like that's the point. What can I do? And so anyway, so all that to say that yeah, I like the term for many, many reasons. It is an obvious play, but in my opinion, it's a play to strike fear in people. They did the same thing with DEI. You know what I mean? Everyone's afraid of being a racist. I talk. I'm sorry to go into this, but I'm going to. I'm a recruiter by trade, and so I talk to CEOs all the time of like smaller businesses and stuff. And it's unbelievable. There'll be these like hotshot startup CEOs that like the people that you think are like so they're on top of it, they're in charge, like they're sharp, they've got all the cojones you would think, and they're in fear over this stuff. They know it's all BS. They know. And it's like, yeah, but I got stockholders and like I got, the board, I got to worry about like they're terrified. That's what they want. They want you to be the CEO that's terrified of crossing DEI, even though you don't have to.
Mm.
That's what they want. And so anyway, that's my opinion. It is a play, no question about it. But it's a play to get you to stop doing good things in politics.
Yeah, no, I think you're spot on as far as especially like the MSNBC clip that we'd mentioned. I think that's absolutely the angle there, right? Is if you believe anything, anything resembling Orthodox Christianity, essentially, normal Christian thought as of 20 years ago, then you must be a Christian nationalist. And the play is to make you be quiet. You brought up Dusty Devers, though. I crack up at Dusty Devers's approach to it, which is, every time I'm on social media and I see somebody, lambasting him from the mainstream media, his immediate go-to is share it and thank them for the added publicity.
Oh
Like, thank
yeah.
you for putting out what I said. This is, in fact, it. I think that's on. Yeah, I think AD the thing that kind of makes me, because I'm a bit pessimistic just by nature, which is not a godly virtue, I don't think necessarily,
Yeah.
but it saddens me to see, especially with Christians, and especially with Christians that are well studied and well versed, and they know the terrain of the land, so to speak. But Christian nationalism gets lumped in with everything else that totally does not fit together. So you'll lump in postmillennialism, Christian nationalism, theonomy. You'll have guys like Gary North and Rushdoony and Bonson, and pretty much anybody that seems, I guess, offensive to that viewpoint is all lumped in. I had hoped for more clarity than that. I'd hoped for a little
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
with the books that have been written, with the people that have
Yeah.
been engaging with this topic. I would hope for just maybe a little more charitable clarity among brothers.
Yeah.
And I'm not so sure we're gaining a lot of ground in that regard. I hope we are. I hope I'm wrong on that assessment.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I think yeah, I understand. I understand where you're coming from. I think but that's part of the appeal to me about Christian nationalism, because you'll get crazy things said that are so obviously not true, and you can only do that, like you can only pull that lever enough times, so many times before regular people in the pews start saying, you know what, there's something here, like there's some truth to this. Like I'll give you a real recent example. There was a self-proclaimed Rushdoony scholar that said that Stephen Wolf's book was just like a rehashed Rushdoony. It's just another like copied Rushdoony. Um, which, if you've read Stephen Wolf's book, have you read it?
I have, yep.
It's definitely not. Obviously not. Um,
He's coming from a much different starting point for sure.
it's definitely not. And I love Rushdoony. You know what I mean? I'm a big Rushdoony guy, and I appreciate Stephen's book too very much. But it's not Rushdoony at all. So I'm from a pro Rushdoony perspective, it's definitely not. Um, but when you see stuff like that, where people are just face planting, or they say, yes, Christian nationalism, that's just post millennialism. And it's like, it's not, but
Mhm.
you can only pull that lever so many times before someone starts to say, well, you know what, there's got to be some elements in truth here. Because look at them, they're pulling out everything but the kitchen sink to throw at this, and there's such obvious mistakes that they're making. Let me look into it, and I think that could only be a benefit for people looking into some of the more like full orbed arguments for Christian nationalism, like Stephen's book, like Doug's book. I think it's a great thing if people start looking into, the Christian Reconstruction stuff. I don't agree with all of it, but it's all beneficial to know about. And I think that's good. So yeah, I think we're so this is the thing, Joshua. We're in the early stages of kind of a reemergence of stuff that's been around for a while, but like we've kind of forgotten about. And so in the beginning of that, there's going to be a lot of praise and a
Mm,
lot of discussion and a lot of confusion and a lot of, quite frankly, fear as well. Um, but I think the dust will settle, you know what I mean? And people will and it's like you can't expect to have everything, all the kinks knocked out of it right away.
mm,
But there will be action taken. And I think as we start to take action, a lot of these problems will not figure themselves out, but get solved. You know what I mean?
yep.
And we can say, okay, because the thing I always say this on my channel too, it's like we're not like people will say, well, what mode of execution are you going to bring out? And when you're a Christian nationalist kingdom, it's like we're not there yet. We don't need to talk about that because we're at the basic level where it's like, transing kids should be banned, porn should be banned, abortion should be banned. Like basic. We're
Mm,
not anywhere close to the nuance of what mode of execution is the most godly one. You know what I mean?
mm,
That's important, but not right now.
right. Right.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Not right now. Right now, we're like at the barbarian level where it's like we're trying to invent fire right now. Like we don't have to worry about how a combustion engine works. We got to figure out how to stop letting people trans their kids. That's basic stuff. And we can
Mm,
all agree on that. And I think that you do that kind of work in politics, you're doing it for the Lord. And I think we can work towards that together without anyone having to become a Christian nationalist. Um, but anyway, yeah,
yeah, no, I appreciate the charity there too. Um, and I appreciate the optimism. That's good. No, AD, I probably kept you long enough for one day, but where can people follow you? Where you're active on Twitter, I think,
yeah, sort of. Yeah,
somewhat.
I don't really tweet that much, like especially recently, but I am active there, and I'll post videos there sometimes. So yeah, it's 80 Robles Media on Twitter. I think I'm really bad at this. Yeah, 80 Robles Media on Twitter, and also on YouTube, 80 Robles, AD Robles.
AD Robles, and you've got that channel's very active. You're posting a couple times a week, right?
Yeah, at least a couple times a week. I used to do it a lot more, but I'm pretty busy these days. But yeah, a couple times a week, I'll put like 20-minute videos out typically. And that's my style. You did an hour with Owen, so I did eight, like 20, 30-minute videos, and we talked about it. It was good stuff, man. You got to keep doing these. These are fantastic.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much, and thanks again for engaging that. Because, like I said, I'm quite sure we got more traction through your review of it than we did from the original post. So much appreciated.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
Awesome.
Now you're welcome.
Well, AD, thanks so much for coming on. I've been looking forward to it, and it was a blast talking to you, brother.
God bless.
Seated here at my right